Hello and welcome, everybody, to another amazing episode of Coaching from the Heart. I am your host, Tyler Thurman, and joining me, as always, is my good friend, colleague, and co host, Harold Fedderson. Hey, Harold.
Hey, Tyler.
That was a slightly over dramatic intro, but I like
That was
it.
nice and enthusiastic.
So, we're going to be chatting about false idols today, understanding false idols. But before we dive into that topic, just want to give folks a reminder of where they can find both Harold and myself. We're professional transformative coaches, and we walk with people to help them have more wonderful lives. Um, so if you're interested in this conversation and want to go deeper, reach out to us. You can find me at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. And Harold, how about you?
I can be found at www.heraldfedderson.ca.
Fantastic. And go ahead and spell your last name for folks, just in case.
F as in Frank, E-double-D, as in dog, E-R-S-E-N.
Fantastic. I think it was the first about 6 months that we knew each other. I always got the spelling of your name wrong, so I just thought
Very common.
I'd get folks onto the right track there. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the topic. Um, so, false idols. A lot of people probably heard that term before. Um, and it might mean something to you, but it might mean something different to Harold and I. So we're gonna explore what that means to us and what it has to do with anything. so so for me, um, false idols are kind of a way of talking about something. I'm going to use the language from A Course in Miracles here. Something that appears to have the power to take or give the peace and the love of God. Something that can take it away, something that can provide it, something that can create it. Um, it can be anything, any person, any process, any literally anything. And what it um, is something that is outside our own mind that looks like it has a certain power over us. It's something that's different from us, something that's separate from us. Usually it's talked about in the positive, right? So we make false idols of teachers. That's a very common thing. Mentors, family members. A lot of times it's people. So it can be anything else too, and we'll talk about more than just people. But I think people is one of the best places to look because that's one of the places people will be able to relate to this. But so there's you can let's kind of use a specific. You can say you have a teacher, right? And you learn all these wonderful things from this teacher, and then somewhere along the line, we decide they're better than me. they know more than me. There's something unique about them that puts them on a different level than me. That's why we use the term putting someone on a pedestal, right? Which is just kind of another way of talking about false idol, right? You put someone up where they don't belong, right? Because we're all sort of interconnected as human beings. Even though there's all sorts of differences in form, uh, on a deeper level, we're kind of all the same. right? We've got interconnected principles that we all share together as human beings. And so for me, there's a real value in understanding that there's no process, no person, no teacher, no relative, nothing outside us has the power to give or take the peace and the love of God. And for me, that is a really comforting notion. Now, there's the illusion that that can happen because of sort of the projection of the mind. We can temporarily obscure it with our own thinking, but that's different from thinking it's something outside us doing something to us on a meaningful spiritual level. So, Harold, uh, I'm guessing you have a completely different idea and definition of false idols.
Well, this is kind of a what I don't want to say uncharted territories, but it might just be the languaging. I'm not sure, but it's I actually
Probably.
I have questions. So
Sure.
the false idols, I think that's clear. So I'm wondering, false idol, what is a true idol? If
Mm.
there's a false, what is the true?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I've never thought about it in terms of that language before, but it would be our source. Could call it God. Love, whatever that essential self that we all have is made of. That's the best I could come up with, right? Because for me, like if I think about it in terms of, we'll go with the language that I was using, sort of the peace and the love of God, then the sort of real idol would be the peace and the love of God, right? It would just be that as being, as presence, as something not separate from us. Some, some whatever that unifying factor is that we have as human beings, that feeling of connection and love and peace. For me, if I think about it in those terms, that's really what I would come to with that, or where I would come to with that.
So we've got the false idol and the true idol, in a sense. And I'm curious, what is sort of what is an idol? Like, what is the idol part of it?
Hmm. Another word I think I would use is sort of illusion. Um, I like what you did before. So a true idol and a false idol. Um, so I actually like the language of false and true. So one has the appearance of being real, and the other one is actually real, right? Um, and so let's give a common example, or some common examples, or I will anyways. Um, there's all sorts of things in this world that we think give us happiness. And I use that term loosely because it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But to me, it means a deep and profound sense of peace and well-being. We think we're kind of out there looking for a lot of different things that can give us that can sort of, you and I have talked about in the past, sort of manufacturing versus what's the other the other side?
Excavating?
Excavation, right. Uh, uh, it looks like that to me, is that um, there's this thing that we're looking to generate through, it's just a term, right? Uh, false idols, right? Through it's really the quintessential distinction of inside out versus outside in. Is my experience of life created from the inside out, inside the mind, right? Or is it created from my circumstances? Um, and that to me is really at the heart of the conversation behind false idols. Is so we're it's a conversation of separation versus connection, because to make something that, so there are no real false idols, right? We can just make something into a false idol. And so when we're doing that, we're saying, we're sort of imbuing that thing with a power that we already have ourselves. It's sort of, we're playing hot potato with it almost. Not knowing and not understanding that that's ours, right? That's um, that's something that's within us and has always been within us. Uh, and so we say, I think what, at least where I notice this a lot is with um, teachers and mentors, especially in sort of the spiritual arena, right? So it's very tempting to look at somebody who is sort of enlightened, right? Or not sort of, all the way enlightened. Somebody who's um, has a lot of wonderful teachings. And for us to, instead of hearing, in my experience, the best teachers are just there to redirect us back to look towards ourselves. Instead of hearing, look within, we hear, look to them, right? They're sort of they've got all the answers. They've got what I'm looking for, right? The key to happiness or peace or enlightenment or whatever lies with them, and in that we put them up on that pedestal. We hold them apart from us, and then we create an artificial disconnect, even though that person certainly does have a likely a deeper understanding of kind of what's going on behind life. That doesn't mean that we're inherently, like, we don't also have that capacity. We just haven't quite gotten there yet. So yeah, any other, just poke away, Harold.
Well, we might spend this whole show just letting Herald get clear on what we're talking about.
That's good. That's good. I picked the topic if nobody else can realize that, or nobody else has realized that.
There's one guy who's in a fog and one guy who's in the sun.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let me give you I'll share an example from my life and see if I'm in the right arena.
Yeah, sure. That sounds perfect.
Okay, so I have a friend whose spiritual teacher is, I want to say was, because this guy is gone, but so his spiritual teacher was Sai Baba from India. And my spiritual teacher for the last 10 years has been Adyashanti.
Sure.
And our relationship to our spiritual teachers is very different. He went to India to see his, I've been to California to see mine. For him, Sai Baba is God walking on earth. And
sure.
Sai Baba is the one, and he's the healer, and he's the one true deal, and we need to pray to Baba and devote ourselves to Baba. Yeah.
Sure.
So it's a certain kind of relationship.
Absolutely.
And my relationship with my spiritual teacher is he can. So you know how you're so young, but when we get older, we get
Only in form.
cataracts. Cataracts create a blurry fogginess between what is there and what is seen, so to speak.
Yeah, it's little chunks floating in your eye if you don't know what that is.
Oh, okay, yeah. So how I look at Adya is a guy whose cataracts have been completely removed,
Uh-huh.
and I still
Mm.
have cataracts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Um,
Right.
I don't pray to him or
Yeah, you don't worship
I
him,
don't
I think is
worship
what you're
him.
saying.
Yeah, so it's a completely different kind of relationship.
Yep.
So, and I'm not saying, because this could get messy, but I'm not saying that my friend, that Sai Baba is a false idol, but the relationship between my friend and his teacher is so significantly different from my relationship to my teacher.
Yeah.
Is the relationship kind of what you're talking about, where for
Absolutely.
him, Sai Baba is the one, like he is the one true God walking on the earth. He's Jesus reincarnated or whatever, walking, healing, making stuff out of magic out of his hands. Like he's the thing and the
Yeah.
only one. He's the only one on the planet.
Right. Absolutely. You hit it nail on the head. Because it's everything. It's the relationship, right? It's not the actual two people. It's what we make of. In this example, it's a teacher, right, of this other person. It's what we make them into with our mind, right? Which we do that with. We do a version of that with everything and everybody. We there's them and how they really are and what they really see. Sometimes people really are looking without cataracts. To use uh, your. I'm assuming that's metaphor. um, and some people are just sort of putting on a facade as well. That can happen, and most people have probably seen that happen. Um, but and then there's what it's kind of the them that exists in our mind, right? And so there's kind of two two versions, and the only significant part, the only relevant part is, like you said, the relationship, which is how we relate to them, right? But it doesn't have to be a person. It could be someone who's in a very different place in their life. Could be a drug addict, right? Their sort of idol in life is the drug, right? Or um, it's also very common in romantic, intimate relationships, right? We make of the other person the one true source of love for us in our life, right? And so we we put a lot of pressure on that person. you, I can only experience this deep, meaningful love with you. And by the way, only when you behave in certain ways. But that's a conversation for another time. I believe we've had that conversation before, Harold. But that's the same thing. It's this universal thing that we just. Another way you could say it is a false god, right, or a false deity. Wherever it is, we see the source of our well-being as coming from, and it's almost always, in order for it to be this, something separate from us, something outside us, something that we need to get, something that we need to consume, something we need to um, relate to, if it's another person, more and more and more, or understand better and better. So yeah, that's exactly right.
Hmm. It reminds me of how does this go? It reminds me of when I was in my 20s, I was really curious about the differences between Christianity and Buddhism because I was raised as a Christian. And in the Christian tradition that I was raised in, there's the belief that you're a soul and you will ascend to heaven or you will descend to hell.
Sure.
Or you could go to purgatory where you just hang out in a midsection. And in Buddhism, now there are lots of different types of Buddhism and lots of types of Christianity. So I'm just talking about
Of course.
mine and the what limited Buddhist studies I had done living in northern Canada, in my 20s, pre-internet,
Oh,
and in
nice.
in Buddhism, there's no such thing as a soul, and there's no such thing as a heaven, and no such thing as a hell. And these two traditions have been around for Christianity's been around for 2,000 years. Buddhism's been around for 2,500 years. Like they're really old. And I got curious. I was really curious. Like, how can these two they don't match at all? I was like, how is this possible? How is this possible that these two things have been around for so long and they're completely different? One has a soul that's eternal and goes somewhere, and one has no soul. There's still this reincarnation thing, or rebirth is what they actually call it. And so I was like, what's really going on here? And the one of the conclusions I came to was kind of the conversation we're having here, which is so in Buddhism, the goal is enlightenment, and Christianity, the goal is to enter the kingdom of heaven, which, according to my limited understanding when I was young, was available here on earth. Like the kingdom of heaven, you can walk the kingdom of heaven here on earth.
You're getting into controversial territory here.
Sure. I'll take whatever heat I can.
Not from me, but
yeah, from those people may not be watching either. But and then in Buddhism,
that's very true.
In Buddhism, you can attain enlightenment in this life. So I was like, okay, that's common ground. Both are saying they can have their ultimate sort of thing in this life.
Yeah.
So then I started looking at sort of the function of the process. So in Buddhism, you're supposed to let go of all desire, and by letting go of all desire or it's really actually your attachment to your thoughts, your emotions, your whatever.
Yeah, it's all
when you let go of all of those, then you sink completely into the present, and the sort of truth of what you are just exists. I'm like, okay, that I can see how that makes sense to me. And then I was like, how is it in Christianity? And in Christianity, there are just the two sort of rules in Christianity. One is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And the other is give yourself completely to God. And I remember really sitting with that second one for a long time, because I was raised with the first one, do unto others as you do. Right? Most of us were in North America. But it's the second one. Give yourself completely to God. And I sat with that for a long time, and I kept saying, what would that mean? What would that mean? And eventually I said, if you gave over everything, if you gave over who you thought you were, what you thought you believed in, what you thought was right, what you thought was wrong, how you think things should go, if you started giving everything over to God, you would end up completely empty and present in the same sort of, it looked to me as the exact same sort of thing as in Buddhism, if you just dropped all your attachments. Two completely different, sort of paths, if you will.
Yeah, methodologies or thought systems
or process or function or unfolding or whatever.
Right.
But the two kind of arrive, to me, they appear to arrive at the same actual human experience.
Yeah.
Which in Buddhism they call enlightenment, and in Christianity they call it, becoming one with God, or unity with the divine or whatever. So it kind of reminds me of this conversation, or this conversation brings this back up. This whole because if you have so going back to my friend, for example, If he devotes himself entirely, wholeheartedly to this Baba, he may just arrive at the exact same human experience, which is what you and I always say, always go back to your own experience. Like whatever's in a book, it's irrelevant what's in a freaking book. Like you have to go to your own experience. So I'm thinking he will arrive at the same human experience that I will arrive at by going through with my teacher.
Right. Yeah, well, to me that just reminds me of it's a confusion of levels, right? It's we get so obsessed with the form of things, and like you said, the ritual, the process, or the the teachings, if you will,
The denomination.
the words, the language, that's all form, right? We get so obsessed with that, so focused on it that we forget we're all human beings. We're all in this together. Um, and it, even, those things would seem to be sort of diametrically opposed, like you said. And then we sort of find ourselves in the same place, not because of the form of those things, but because what we were looking for was sort of where we started in the first place, which was inside of us, right? It, you know, um, it sort of gets unlocked or uncovered, or not, I want to say expedited, but whatever it is excavated. Yes, gets excavated, and it's there. And then we say, oh, Christianity's the best, or Buddhism is the best, or because very few people sort of take both paths all the way, I'm guessing. And it's just us doing that thing that we do while we're here, which is we focus on the external, and we get caught up in the details, and we miss out on the fact that we have a mind, and we have this thing I like to call it innate well-being, innate peace of mind, essential self. We've got something going on, everybody, that we have access to, that is just, you can't use words. It's just beautiful. It's just, you know, nirvana, right? To be full, I love your sort of description of to be fully present. Let's just say with another human being, but it could be you're fully present, in a room by yourself too. To have that experience of, for lack of a better term, oneness. That's kind of what we're talking about. And false idols can and do get in the way of that, because it kind of gets us looking in the wrong direction, I think. Even though we're all eventually going to find our way back to ourselves, it's just kind of it's an illusion, right? It's like, okay, this thing that is completely separate from me, I need to somehow get that and put it in here. Whether it's in my body, it's in my mind. I need that. I need to, I need to consume it. I need to find it and create it, as if it wasn't inside of us already. Right. And so it's not that you can't still stumble upon it, because it's there to be stumbled upon. It's there to be, it's already there. It just we can get a little distracted, I think, with thinking it's somewhere that it's not. It's not really uh, it's a non-temporal, non-local thing, right? So when I say it's not there, I don't mean like it's in our body. Um, I don't really know how to talk about that because we're having a conversation based in dualism, and it's non-dualism. But there's nothing that we need to do with false idols because every single person makes every single human being does it. We all use the power of thought to sort of create the illusion of separation. We say this thing is better, this thing is worse, this thing can give me happiness, this thing can take happiness away from me, this thing can, it's got all these magical powers. We all do that. And really all that's in the way of us seeing as you um, as you put it, Harold, the true idol. Right? I don't know if I like that language, but all we really need to do to get back in touch with that is explore it for ourselves. Like you said, Harold, that our experience is really all that's important. And in a lot of ways, even our false idols, it looks like they kind of lead us down a path back to the truth anyways. So I guess my advice would be don't worry about it too much. Because, if I look back on my life, I'm just kind of thinking for myself. I've certainly done this plenty, right? Where I make of a book or a teacher or a mentor, like they're the best, right? And I need to learn everything that they have to teach so that I can be the best. Or I can have what they have, or I can experience what they're experiencing. And I've done that. I've done a lot of that, right? I probably still do that a lot without knowing it. But maybe I needed to take that route to come to see more clearly that the answer wasn't in that other person or that book or that message or that teaching. God, there's a beautiful quote that I don't know, maybe you've heard it, Harold. It's something about we come to the end of all our travels, and we find ourselves back where we started, but to know it for the first time, as if for the first time. I'm gonna have to look that up. But I can't remember exactly the language, but something beautiful like that. So I'm not here to be like, you should never make anything into a false idol. That's just kind of what we do with our thinking a lot. So you don't need to like get rid of it. You don't need to micromanage it. Just maybe explore it. Take a second look. See if you're making somebody in your life into this deity. Or actually, the first people we do that with is our parents, right? They're the big people around us, and they're like God, right? They feed us, they bathe us, they clean us, they shelter us, give us clothes. And at some point in pretty much everybody's lives, we get disillusioned, right? And we say, oh, my parents are people too, right? They're human beings too. They have an ego mind, and they also have access to the peace and love of God, right? Um, and so just look around your life and see if, not see if, but see where you're doing that, because we're all doing that to some extent somewhere. Um, and just see if you can let it go, even just a little bit. Say, oh, you know what? Even though they look supernatural, um, maybe what they've got, I've got, and I just haven't quite discovered it to the degree that they have discovered it for themselves.
It seems like this, what we're talking about here is birthed from a self-doubt or
Hmm.
a self-ignorance.
So,
Because like when
say
you
more.
just said they're the source, like we often think, oh man, I could never be like that person,
Yeah.
or that person is something special.
Right. Yeah.
And that person might be something special, but as in terms of
Yeah. It
in
is a
terms of
conversation of specialness, though. I like that word.
yeah, I like to think of it as in terms of source. Like if you don't see that you are the source of all there is,
Yeah.
then somebody else is the source. And
Right.
if that's the case, then they're the one that you're worshiping or
Yeah.
idolizing.
Right.
Um,
Right.
which can be it can be a bit tricky because I think it's easy for this to become a what I'm the source. Oh yeah, I am the center of the universe.
Yeah, the ego can take that and
Sweet,
run
yeah,
with it.
and
Yeah,
run with it, and then all of a
absolutely.
sudden it's
I'm
like bow to
glad.
me, and you know then we've got those what are those giant stadiums, those giant Christian stadiums where they pack like 10,000 people in there, and then you know there's
Mm,
all this money and everything's flowing, and then you know all the homeless people are starving out on the street. Um, you know it can become that where you get to the point where you see yourself as the source, but you haven't seen that the
yeah,
source that you are is the source of all.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
so you just get to the point where you're like, oh my god, like I am I am the source, and then like you said, the ego takes it, and then all of a sudden you know you've got a church erected in your name, and
Yeah.
um,
And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm glad that you brought that up, Harold, because that's a great point. Um, it is, to that, I guess I would say, be humble, right? You know, so,
just keep looking.
or just keep looking. Yeah, because it's not the us that we think we are that is the source. You know, it's not the false self to use, you know, this conversation to talk about all the false things. It's not the false self. It's that other thing that we haven't discovered yet, or we haven't uncovered as much of, or maybe you've stumbled into it at different periods in your life, um, but it didn't stick around, or it didn't seem to stick around. Um, yeah, I really like that. Keep looking.
Because
It's
the thing that sort of comes, the reason why I said that was
sure.
as soon as so the thing about as far as I'm understanding what we're talking about, if we believe somebody else is the source, it's all the answer is just in my language right there. I believe that person is the source.
Sure.
It's a belief system, and it's held in the space of thinking.
Right.
So then if we turn it back and we say, you know, I am the source of all things. You know, I am the
Hmm.
peace and love of God. Or
Right.
I think I messed up your thing there, but
No,
um,
you're spot on.
we're still in the same we're still in the same place. We're still in our
Yeah.
thought structure.
Yep.
And if the whole of our being is in our thought system or our thinking, then not only are we not fully present, but we aren't actually being what we are.
Right.
We're actually we're in sort of a Rubik's cube of thinking,
Yeah.
and
We're
it's
kind of.
as though everything in that thing is real. Whether we believe somebody else has it or we believe we have it, it's the same.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting because then your false idol could be yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. It's sort of this this term. It just comes to mind. It's not very appropriate, but it's like mental masturbation, right? It's just we're kind of preoccupied with our ideas of self, um, or somebody else, right? Whatever it is, it's just it's that you said that realm. I really love the language you were using there. That realm of thought and belief, um, and not the realm of experience
Experience, yeah.
or being or truth. All synonyms in this context. Um,
And the
yeah.
interesting thing about because that's really it. Like the more we're actually in the experience of our being, the less we realize that we're not in the thought structure.
Hmm.
Like when you, let's say when you were a kid and you were opening a Christmas present, like you were fully immersed in the opening of the present, and you wouldn't have realized in that moment that there was no thinking actually happening.
Mm.
It's only after the gift is open and that raw sort of threshold of the opening of the gift is past where we are holding the gift, and now we get into our thinking. We're like, I love this is exactly what I wanted, and look at this, and we start, and then we're in the thinking process and
Right.
we're out of the experience of it, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we don't I don't think we notice that very often, because when you're actually in the experience, you don't notice that you're not thinking.
Yeah, and you're also not trying to get anywhere either.
Hmm.
Because like in this conversation, it's kind of a here we are, here we want to get to. Um, it can be present. It's hard not to present it that way. But yeah, it's just it's almost like you fall into it um, because it's already there. It's already available to us in any moment.
And I
Um,
like I like how you said that, because I think it's if we just turn it a little bit. So instead of falling into the experience, what actually happens is the thought structure actually just falls,
yeah.
and then
Yeah,
there
because
and
there's
then
nothing. Yeah, I love that. I love that because it really the only sort of malleable piece is the thought structure. That there's this other essential structure that's just kind of. It's like most people probably heard this analogy, but who was the sculptor? Michelangelo,
he
the
was a sculptor and a painter.
the
He
the
did the
one that
Sistine
did
Chapter. David.
David. Yes,
Yeah, that
yes.
was Michelangelo.
I knew that you would know that. My art history is a little weak, but they said that he just, and this is probably true for a lot of sculptors, but he just saw he didn't see the chunk of marble. He saw, you probably know how this goes better than I do, but he saw, he saw David and the pieces that needed to be removed or chipped away. Right. I don't know if you have a better way of saying that, but
Yeah,
uh,
David's already in the marble, and he just removes everything that isn't David. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the same thing. It's like we've all got that metaphorically David inside of us. That's that deeper love, that deeper peace, that just presence, that and then we've got all this thinking, all this mental activity that is there sort of on top of it. One of my mentors, George Pransky, he I loved one of the ways that he talks about it is um, that there's this beautiful flute playing all the time in our mind. And he said, but there's also a brass band that is blaring, and you can't hear the flute over it until the brass band quiets down. The flute is never wavering, it's always playing. The brass band is kind of coming and going. Sometimes it's at a fever pitch, sometimes it's quieter. And then you're like, oh, there's a flute playing. Where did that? Has that? And then we think the flute is what comes and goes. And really, my experience of it, at least, is that it doesn't come and go. It's that, however you want to talk about it, our awareness of it, our experience of it, ebbs and flows. But it's always there. It's always there.
And both of those instruments play on top of silence.
Well, you could take it, it's a metaphor. Come on, Harold.
Which is the root of it all, yeah?
Yeah, sure. We'll go with that.
It's an interesting, let's just riff off that for a second. So
Yeah,
that's an
sure.
interesting thing. So you could say like the silence is the all oneness, everything, the true God of gods, if you will, or whatever. And the flute is the sort of the unique expression of your, if we were Christian, it'd be your soul, or whatever. And then the brass band is like the whole thinking structure that you believe what you are, or what have you. And often, the first process is just realizing that there's this unique flute that has a unique song, which can only be played through this body, through this time.
But it has the same source.
But all of it is on top of
Yeah,
the ultimate source, which is the silence.
I like that. Very nice. You redeemed yourself.
Thank you.
For ruining my metaphor. No, I'm just kidding. I really loved how you extrapolated that. That was very cool.
I just get really music metaphors, water metaphors, and light metaphors.
That's as good as we've got. Really, you really can't speak about any of this without metaphor, right? Without something that isn't what we're talking about, right? It's very funny that we sort of have made our lives about being in this conversation with people, and you can't actually address it directly. And there's something beautiful about that too. So I think we've come to, actually I've in my mind I'm thinking about the Buddhism Christianity example you gave, and I'm also thinking about you and I in this conversation. I feel like we have sort of
arrived together,
which I think is quite nice. So I wonder, Harold, is there anything else from where you're sitting and your understanding of just this conversation of false idols that you might want to add to the conversation?
My favorite part is just that sort of last bit we were talking about with the mind, because it's the part, I see it all the time, how people are in their thoughts, and then they believe what they're thinking, and then they live their life from that. And it's a completely artificial construct.
Right.
And because the thoughts can change, as your experience, or as you talk to other people with different thoughts, we're like, oh, that's a different thought than mine. No, that's a better thought than mine. So then we adopt, but we're still always so much living in this thought structure instead of, let's use our last analogy. So we're living as though we're the brass band, right? And we're writing music for the brass band. We're finding concerts for the brass band.
Yeah.
We're putting out CDs, of the brass band.
And my brass band is different from your brass band.
Yeah, and mine's actually way better. Like,
And
you
no,
should hear my
mine's
tuba
better.
player. Um,
My saxophone rocks.
um, Instead of realizing, there's underneath of that whole brass band is this flute that that pre-exists the whole brass structure,
Hmm.
which can't be accessed through or by the brass band.
Right.
You can't think your way to the flute. You can't play your brass instruments to the flute. It can't be done because the brass band exists as an entire, it's a band. It's a band on its own.
Right.
So I think, part of the process is just letting go of our noticing, like, what are your thoughts? Like, notice that you have these thoughts. Notice how attached you are to them. And then look at where in your life, because we've all had this experience so thousands of times where we just feel the fluteness. We feel the flute playing.
Mm-hmm.
We just feel the flow. We just feel like the joy is just flowing through us, and we're just alive in our very unique expression,
Yeah.
and then once you start, once you get into that, start sensing the silence that your
Mm.
unique flute is playing on top of, you
Right.
know uh, and it has to come through our experience. We have to go into our being to get to get the experience of this, to reconnect. And you don't have to go through some process. There's no steps or whatever. It can happen right now, just like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I like that you kind of pointed to the notion that we just don't know it. It's like we're sleepwalking through life, and we don't know. Um, we don't know that this, because the brass, to use the analogy, the brass band is our reality. We think it is. It's made of thought. But that's like all there is. And what if there was something else? What if there's something deeper? And I think everyone, like you said, intuitively knows there's something else. That's not the whole show, right? There's a second act. Or uh, one of my favorite quotes. I think it's Eric Fromm that said it. That just because millions of people share the same form of mental pathology does not make those people sane. That's kind of what we're dealing with here. I'm not, not in the derogatory sense. We're all insane because we all think we are something that we're not, or there's more to us than we know. Let's go with that. Um, and uh, so, so we all know what that brass band feels like. So when you find yourself there, just get curious. Maybe, like, you know what? Maybe there's more to life than this buzzsaw of thought, um, where it's all about judgment. It's all about me and you and separation, and I got to get mine, and I got to reach my goals so that I can be happy and at peace, and all of these ideas of what's that thing we've shared several times, that Rumi quote, there's a field, I'll meet you there.
Mm.
Beyond all ideas of right and wrong. good and bad. There's a field. And there's something beyond those ideas. That's, in my experience, that is true. And just, if you haven't experienced that in a while, that's okay. Just keep looking. You'll find your way back there because it's you. It's all of us. It's good stuff. So Harold,
That was a perfect parting shot. You have to have the parting shot.
I had the parting shot today?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Breaking my routine. Can't believe it. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this conversation. Started a little rocky, probably, but we found our way.
We pulled me from the ignorance.
Yeah, well, I needed you to pull me from somewhere. But anyways, if you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, feel free to reach out to either Harold or myself if you want to take this deeper. If you want to have take it to the next level, so to speak. We work with people in this way professionally. So you can find me at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. And I believe the little link for that is at the bottom of the video here. So Harold, where can everybody find you?
You can find me at www.haroldfeddersen.ca.
Fantastic. So with that, we're going to conclude the show. So everyone have a wonderful rest of your week, and thank you for joining us. And may you discover that peace and that love that is within. Take care.